Hello and welcome to another edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, I'm Cale Berger, joined as always by Chris Mueller, and it is our Duquesne RMU basketball preview show. We're going to be looking at both teams, the one from the A10, one from the NEC. We did Pitt 2 weeks ago, we did the NBA last week, and now to touch on the other two big-time local programs in the Dukes and the Colonials. When you look at Duquesne, last season 19-13, preseason they're pegged to finish 8th in the Atlantic 10, and they're coming off an improvement in what was the second year for Coach Keith Dambrot, and looking to make another big step in 2019-2020 as well.
Yes, and this is the second straight year, or they're going to try to finish higher than they were seeded in the A10 last season. They were picked 11th, finished 6th. So kind of exceeding expectations is something Keith Dambrot has always instilled in his going into his third season with the Dukes. There's a lot of storylines. I mean, first, Sincere Carey, can he take the next step forward? How are they going to make up for the loss of Eric Williams? Frankie Hughes goes down with a torn meniscus in practice to begin this season. So it should be interesting for the Dukes, and also they don't really have a home court. They're going to be playing in 3 different arenas for their home games, which obviously we saw with Robert Morris when they were going through the renovation process. That can kind of be an issue too.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting kind of dynamic for this season to look at for the Dukes. Is you can't even wrap your head around what that feels like for a player to have not a home court for probably. Is it just this season or continue until next season as well? I mean, it all depends on how long it takes for them to build that new arena there on the Bluff. But that's got to be difficult if you're a player to, you're in a different locker room every game, it seems like. And even when you're on the road, but even when you're at home, you don't feel like you truly have that home crowd advantage kind of thing. You said they're going to be playing games at La Roche,
Robert Morris, and PPG Paints.
Exactly. So let's admit that PPG Paints Arena is right next to Duquesne, so that's not at some trek, but still.
And it's pretty cool. I mean, you're playing in a stadium. When Robert Morris did it, no one would come to the games just because it's like a 25-minute drive.
Yeah.
So,
for Duquesne, I mean, you're not really going that far down the road, but it is still, it's kind of something to adjust to because you're not playing in a place you're familiar, except for when you play the city game every year, which is another thing to look at for this season. No city game for the Dukes, but they do have a tough non-conference schedule. But no city game against the Panthers this year. We'll talk about Pitt playing Robert Morris in a little bit. But I think that's another thing I want to talk about, as we look at Duquesne this season, is no matchup with the Panthers. A big reason for that is because of the extended ACC schedule that the Pitt has to deal with, and they just couldn't fit in the game with Duquesne. But personally, I think it's a real shame that they weren't able to make that game happen, because I think it's something that the city of Pittsburgh love, basketball fans in Pittsburgh really enjoy, and something that it always seems to be a good matchup regardless of where those programs are.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing for Pittsburgh basketball scene, a scene that is a little underrated. A lot of people, contrary to popular opinion, they love basketball here, and
trust us, we know.
And we've seen some competitive games over the last couple seasons, dating back to when Kevin Stallings' group lost to the Dukes. That was the first time. I forget the actual statistic, but first time in a long time,
decades,
right, that they lost. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's cool to see that Pitt and RMU will play. That there's a little game there, but there's also not even a county game. There's no RMU Duquesne game this season either, which was another call it rivalry a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be interesting. I'm almost positive they're resuming that city game series.
They are, but they're just taking a 1-year hiatus, it seems like. But still,
it'll be different.
Yeah, something that's been going on for so long. It is a shame that it's not at least continuing yearly as it has for such a long time. But back to the Dukes, like we said, picked to finish 8th in the preseason poll in the A10. And you look at those top returners. You mentioned Sincere Carey, who was, I think, maybe the freshman, the big-time freshman in this city that got overlooked last season. Everyone talked about the freshman at Pitt, but I think Sincere Carey had a phenomenal season for the Dukes and looks to take a really big step this year for Duquesne in the A10. Third team preseason All A10 this year. Was really impressed with him last year, not only in the game against Pitt when I saw them get to go at it, but I think he's a phenomenal distributor. He's a guy that really runs their offense well, and I think also he showed maturity that you normally see from
Yeah.
many freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, when you watched him play last season, you didn't think he was a freshman if you would have walked in and not know. That's just the way, he kind of, carries himself. Sincere carry. Can he carry the load? There's so many puns. But, they're returning, their top 4 scorers. But Eric Williams, his loss, he was their leading scorer last year. Dynamic two-way player, dynamic scorer, dynamic rebounder. It's obvious why he transferred to Oregon. He kind of was a developmental project when Keith Dambrot came in. So how they make up for that loss defensively, especially, they had problems defensively last season. Keith Dambrot came out and said in the preseason that they could score, but it was just they couldn't really guard anybody.
Exactly.
And it was really surprising because at Akron, Dambrot, he built his teams around defense. Mm-hmm. That was kind of gritty teams, big down low, which is something that going into this season we're going to see for the first time. At Akron, he built those teams around height in the front court, and this year they got 2 6'11" guys, the tallest recruiting class.
And that's like you mentioned, is last year they didn't have any difficulty scoring. They had the 3rd best scoring offense in the A-10, the 2nd best 3-point shooting team. But you look at the defensive numbers, they were last in scoring defense in the A-10, giving up 74.3 points per game. And you talked about Eric Williams. He is a transfer now who went to Oregon. And like you said, what always struck me about Eric Williams, you said he was a prospect kind of coming in. He was a developmental guy. But what always impressed me about Eric Williams was just his physique. He looked like a basketball player. He looked like a legitimate guy that you would see at a Power 5 program. Power 5. But you would see at one of the top programs in the country with just the way he is built. And, good for him that he was able to move on to Oregon, a great basketball program. Certainly shows how much he has worked and how much he was able to improve his game. But like you said, I think it's going to be a very big loss, not only on the offensive side for Duquesne, because, he was a guy that could get a shot against people. He had a physical advantage against some guys in the A-10 as well. But he was a guy on defense that his length gave a lot of people problems.
Yeah, now it really falls on Michael Hughes in the front court. He had 17 double-digit scoring games last season, really came on as the year went on. Can he kind of, carry it down there, especially guiding some of these freshmen and the JUCO transfers? Tavion Dunn-Martin, 6th man of the year last season. Can he, will he come off the bench again? Will he move into a starting role? These are all questions that still need to be answered, but it's kind of exciting that there is opportunity this season. There's opportunity for them to finish higher than 8th. They kind of feel disrespectful by that. And really, they do have some talent, and this freshman class is intriguing.
And the other guy, too, that I think is going to play a big role on this Duquesne team is Lamar Norman Jr., the 6'3" sophomore guard, comes out of the state of Michigan. I think he's a guy that he played a lot down the stretch for the Dukes last season, especially at the back end of the year. I think that him coming in, playing alongside Sincere Carey, and you keep Tavion Dunn-Martin in that 6-man role. Yeah, I think that's going to be a really dynamic backcourt for the Dukes that, they gave people problems last year, but I think they're going to continue to give people problems, especially on offense, just because, they have great size, and they have skill sets that complement each other.
Yeah, and I want to see Maseo Austin, the Kennedy Catholic standout. Is he going to start alongside Carey in the backcourt? Will it take some time for him to adjust to Keith Dambrot's system? Keith Dambrot, we saw with Mike Lewis. Mike Lewis, he didn't budge on Mike Lewis. He came in and was like, "You're going to earn your minutes. I know you were, the star player before me, or you were really highly touted, but there had some issues there. Ended up transferring. So it'll be interesting to see how he's out of Kennedy Catholic. Did a lot of great things in the Whitfield. Played well. Will he start off the bat, or will it take a little bit of time for him to get incorporated?
I think the other guy that's pretty intriguing, you talked about this is one of the tallest recruiting classes, the tallest they've had in Duquesne history.
6'11" guys.
The 6'11" guy I want to look at is James Ellis, the center out of Westinghouse here in the city of Pittsburgh. One of the bigger basketball prospects that's come out of the city in quite some time. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to add something to this Duquesne team that they haven't had, at least in recent years, and that's size and a rim protector down low. Yeah. And that's something that just in college basketball as a whole, if you have a guy standing at 6'11", because we might act like, everyone who plays college basketball is huge and there's plenty of big men to go around. It's really not the case. I mean, you look at, for example, you look at Pitt over the last few years, they haven't had much size outside of Terrell Brown.
Right.
So for Duquesne, I think it's important that they get a guy like James Ellison, that he also plays a big role this season, because the impact of having a rim protector down there, the impact of having a guy that can grab long rebounds is important, and you just can't duplicate with other guys.
Yeah, I know. And Keith Dambrot, I mean, he won 20 games in 12 seasons at Akron, and it was because of that height. That's kind of what he likes. And I know a couple years ago, their rim protector was Titus Verhoeven, and he transferred, and he was not 6'11" height, but he could really do some of those same things. He was a freshman, but he blocked shots, alter shots. Not people weren't as inclined to come into the paint. So yeah, James Ellis, another highly touted prospect. Interesting to see how Keith Dambrot, again with like Austin, is he going to be ready to go, or is it going to take time for him to really adjust?
And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the new branding for the Duquesne Dukes. They have new logos, new uniforms. I think some exciting stuff happening on the Bluff, and I'm really a traditionalist when it came to the Duquesne logo. I really loved the D in the kind of medieval style or whatever it was, but it's the new logo and the new branding has really started to grow on me.
A lot of people hated on it when it first came out on Twitter. I remember last year, but I mean, seeing the new jerseys, I like it. I think they needed to go with a switch. Not everyone's gonna, you're not gonna please everybody. I just think with the whole Nike thing that Dambrot's brought in, through LeBron, through his ties to LeBron and the Nike complete, branding that they've undergone. It's just cool to see. I like it. I think, and then the other thing that I just wanted to touch on was, how Pitt went to Italy. Duquesne went to the Bahamas this summer, which, and competed down there, which is pretty cool. They got to practice a little bit. I know leading up to it, some summer stuff, kind of get this team to gel together. So we'll see if that pays dividends as the season is coming real soon.
And I think the other thing too that can't be undersold about those, preseason kind of trips or tournaments or whatever you want to call them, you get 10 practices in the summer.
Right.
And Pitt got the same thing. Duquesne got it as well. And you really can't, I guess, discredit how important that is and how beneficial it is, especially when you look at a team like Duquesne trying to work in some new faces, trying to bring some other guys along that maybe didn't play as much last year, or also just trying to see improvement from guys that did excel last season. I think that's invaluable to have those extra practices you get with Coach Dambrot, you get with the whole staff, you get the whole team there.
Yeah.
And, gives you an opportunity before, stuff actually counts, gives you an opportunity to really get an identity earlier on than maybe other programs around the country of what your team actually is. Because college basketball programs are not allowed to take these every year. Mm-hmm. I think it's every 4 years or something, or maybe every 5 years, or maybe there's only a certain number you can take in a certain amount of time. I forget what the number is or what the rule is, but that gives you that gives you an advantage. Yeah. I feel like in those seasons. Now it remains to be seen if it'll pay off, mm-hmm. But I think that's definitely something beneficial for Duquesne to be able to do that. And hey, I mean, who wouldn't want to go to the Bahamas?
I know. And then another beneficial thing to start the year is they start with an exhibition game against Bob Huggins and WVU, West Court. So how are they going to fare against that? I mean, otherwise their non-conference schedule, it's not the strongest. I think RMU has a stronger schedule than them. They have a couple Ivy League games, Princeton and Columbia, play Marshall, UAB. It's just going to be interesting to see if they can be ready for A10 play, when last year they started 5-1 in the A10 and everyone was like, whoa, Duquesne's in first. What's going on? This is crazy. Everybody, and then they struggled down the stretch a little more and came back to who they were. So if they do get off to another hot start, can they keep that going, or will it kind of be the opposite where they start slow, dig themselves a hole, and have to climb out of it?
Like we said, Duquesne pegged preseason to finish 8th in the A10. We'll look at the entire preseason pool. It goes VCU 1, Davidson 2, Dayton 3, Rhode Island 4, St. Bonaventure, Richmond 6, St. Louis 7, and then the Duquesne Dukes. Then we got George Mason, LaSalle, Massachusetts, George Washington, St. Joe's, and Fordham. So a little bit of a modest projection this season for the Dukes, but it seems like every year Coach Dambrot has been there, they've exceeded their preseason ranking and kind of beaten some of those preseason projections, and I think that's probably what they're in line to do this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the same thing as every year he's been here, and he's been the first to admit. I mean, now the home game situation I think could play play a role. I remember I covered a couple A10 games last season. I think there was a triple overtime or a double overtime one, George Mason, and the Palumbo Center was rocking.
Yeah.
Now they've had some attendance issues in the past, but really last season, especially when they got off to that 5-1 start, people were showing up. It was loud. It was electric in there, and they're not going to have that. So that could play a role too. To where they don't finish middle of the pit, they're 10th, 11th in the A10, so that's just another thing at least that I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, if we're overlooking whatever is going on the court, I think the one thing that really is going to hamper the Dukes this year and probably give them problems and challenge them and give them a challenge of trying to exceed what they did the last few seasons, I think is going to be the struggle of, not playing at home, not having a traditional home court. Like we said, we do have those games at PPG Paints, but you look at that non-con schedule and you got a ton of games at LaRoche College, or LaRoche University, excuse me. I mean, LaRoche is not close to Duquesne. It's like a 25-minute drive. You're in McCandless. Yeah. It's out of the city, and especially for those students, it's a city campus for Duquesne. Not a lot of those students have cars to get out there. Now, I assume Duquesne will have buses, but it's a higher barrier to entry if you're a student. And trust me, being a student just a short time ago, if you were telling me that Pitt was going to play all of its home games out in, I mean, this is extreme, but Altoona or something, I probably would not travel all the way out there to go to a ton of Pitt games.
Yeah, I know Keith Dambrot has stressed that this is kind of for the long game. This is a process.
Yeah, of course.
He wasn't coming in. He did have some early success. Did some good things in his first couple seasons, but he was not anticipating that. He's kind of been anticipating he needs to get his footing, get his kind of players in before this really, the wheels get turning. And I think with that, he's just, this year it might be rough to not have him, but it's just you needed the upgrade to the Palumbo Center just to compete with A10, with the A10 recruiting, A10 facilities, and not just for men's basketball, for all the sports that use the facility. So I think it's going to pay off in the end. Right now, it's just going to be a little difficult.
And you look at the A10 though, and their A10 schedule, at least. Most of those games are being played at PPG, and
which would be pretty cool.
And I think there's 2 or 3 that are going to be paid at Robert Morris, which, like I said, probably similar transportation issues, at least for the student body. But the majority of their conference games are going to be right there at PPG, so it's not as much of an issue, once the conference slate gets started, but it's more of an issue in the preseason, or not the preseason, in the non-conference.
And I mean, I think, and playing in an arena like that, I mean, you got to remember, it's different than what a lot of these guys are used to, or will be playing in all season. I mean, the lighting's a little different, the court, the field, that can impact shots. So maybe the first couple games where they're in there, it might make a little bit of an impact.
And that's the thing is, things aren't as tight and cozy as they would be in, in the Palumbo Center. Exactly. Whereas you get in a bigger arena, and you always hear this in the Final Four and stuff, at least, is, you talk about depth perception, and some of the shooting percentages go down, and, as much as hard as it might be to believe, it is a real thing that affects players when they get in a new arena, they get in a different situation than they're used to. So that might be something to look at in their first few games there. Before we move on to the Colonials, a game you're looking at on the schedule that you're really looking forward to for the Dukes, and maybe what are we looking for them to improve on in 2019-2020 from last season?
I love the Duquesne-St. Louis matchups. Those are some of the most physical, at least in covering them since Keith Dambrot's been here. Those are some of the most physical basketball games I've seen them play. I know they had a great thriller down in St. Louis last season, it was at Duquesne. And so, I mean, I'm looking forward to those battles. I mean, seeing them play VCU, can they hang with them? That'll be fun. I know Rhode Island's returning a lot of guys.
Yeah.
So those are, A10, I'd say St. Louis improve upon is defense. I mean, they really couldn't guard anybody at times last season. And just the fact that that's an aspect of the game that Keith Dambrot had so much success with at Akron. I'd just like to see that improve overall, especially with the height they have coming in.
I would have to agree with you on some of those St. Louis and VCU matchups, because that is the cream of the crop right now in the A10. And you look at last season, they had some very competitive games against those teams in conference play. I would also agree on the defense, obviously, because that was clearly their biggest issue last season was they couldn't guard anybody. They couldn't stop anyone from making shots. And, I mean, that's the name of the game in college basketball. You got to play defense. You got to match up with people. But I think that maybe the one thing that I guess is going a little underneath the radar that I think they need to improve on is Improve on the free throw shooting if you're the Dukes.
That was
13th out of 14 in the A10 last year at free throw shooting, 62.7%. That's got to improve because here's the thing. I mean, they were one of the best offensive teams in the conference last year, but if you make a few more free throws, then maybe some of those games that you gave up a ton of points, maybe you end up winning those because you were able to knock down your free throws. So that's how small the margin is, as we know in college basketball, is, just a few points here or there can change the entire scope of a season. And maybe if they knocked down some of those free throws last year in the 2018-2019 season, maybe they maybe they have a different record. Maybe they're projected to be better this year in the standings. So
gotta make your three.
That's the thing is, you as simple as it might sound, you got to knock down your free throws. You got to take the freebies, and you got to take advantage of those opportunities because it could be the difference, not just in a game, but on a season as a whole. Yeah. As we switch now to the RMU Colonials, some hype about this program as well. Some excitement coming back for the Colonials. As we look at the preseason forecast for Robert Morris. Last season, 18-17, 11-7 in the NEC. Lost in the second round of the NEC tournament. They went to the CIT tournament.
Yes.
Not the NCAA, not the NIT, the CIT.
College Basketball Insider Tournament.
Exactly. With a .com in there. Yeah. And they beat Cornell in the first round. Preseason pick to finish 5th in the NEC preseason poll. And we look at those top returners. It's the Williams brothers. Josh Williams, third team All-NEC last season. John Williams, who is obviously Josh's brother. 35 starts last season at point guard. Other guys, Charles Bain and Giannis Mendy. So, Chris, as we're looking at the Colonials, you followed them and covered them very closely at the last few years. It's the 10th season for head coach Andy Toole. How is this program different? And I think the other big thing we'll touch on a little bit later is the opening of their new arena.
Yeah. Number one difference is that they will not be playing in the Charles L. Sewell Center no longer. They had that transition stage, so now they are in the new arena, bright lights. There's a lot of excitement around the program. How has it changed from early on to now? Andy Toole's looking kind of to get back to that level of sustained success that he had early on in his first 4 or 5 years at Robert Morris. A lot of it had to do with player transfers. He's losing some of his top guys every year. Top scorers, Marquise Reed goes to Clemson and does good things there. Rodney Pryor went to Georgetown. Isaiah Still went to Iona. So he was struggling just from losing these underclassmen to Power 5 programs. With that, the record dipped over the last, I'd say 3 years. They just haven't had that same amount of success and perennial success in the NEC. They were dominant. They were a dominant team when I was there as a student, and then their first year out of school. And so with that, how do they replace Matty McConnell and Malik Petaway? Those are their two biggest losses from last season. It's really gonna make an impact.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look at Matty McConnell, obviously part of the famous McConnell family of hoops here in Western PA. Those guys were program-type guys, and they move on now, and I think, like we said, it's really going to fall, I think, on the Williams brothers. Yeah. Josh Williams, John Williams, those guys, they played well last season, but they didn't have maybe huge roles, especially in the offensive side in terms of the scoring numbers.
Josh Williams did.
Josh did, but John didn't.
John is like the facilitator.
Exactly.
Point. Josh Williams is a streaky shooter. I know he set a program record. It was against a Division II school in scoring last year. Sharpshooter, 3, that kind of guy. Matty McConnell. The thing was, he was the 4-year staple of the program. 4-year starter, really the heart and soul of that team. Could score, could defend. He typically would guard the opposing team's best player. Yeah. That kind of guy. Same as TJ McConnell. Same kind of player. Malik Petaway down low was really your rebounder, your grinded out guy. He could score down low. He could, defensively. So those are two key pieces that really. I don't even think Josh Williams is going to score the ball, but can he play defense? I think it's really going to fall on this recruiting class. It's a highly touted recruiting class to kind of carry the load and see if they can step into some pretty big shoes.
Yeah, you look at the guys coming in this upcoming recruiting class. You're going to have to help me with this.
Noganati.
Okay. DJ Russell, AJ Brahma,
Yeah.
and DeChandre Washington, and the sophomore transfer Jalen Hawkins coming in. So, Chris, to you, who are those guys that you think are going to make an impact coming in right away?
I'll start with Big O. I covered him. He played in that Round Ball Classic All-Star game that Justin Champagne was in.
Okay.
It was at Montour High School, and this kid dominated. He's about 6'9". He comes from Nigeria. I wrote a story on him last year for Pittsburgh Sports Now. He's a
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Subtle, shameless plug. But no, and when he was there, his name was flipped. I thought his name was Noganati Olisa for the longest time, but then Andy Toole told me it can go both ways. So, but Big O, he's 6'9", really long. He's raw to the game of basketball. He started playing in Nigeria, came over, did some tours at a couple prep schools, got cut from Hillcrest. I believe it was Hillcrest, where DeAndre Ayton went in Arizona.
Yeah.
Story. And then Andy Toole found him in Vegas at a summer league AAU tournament. So they brought him in. I think he's a diamond in the rough prospect. He's put on some weight since he's got to school, and seeing him through the RMU Instagram, the basketball Instagram account, he looks big. He looks kind of in shape. I think he is really first and foremost in that recruiting class, the guy that can make an immediate impact.
Now, as we look at, like we talked about, they're coming into a new arena. They are just coming out of, I guess, the scenario that Duquesne is now starting to deal with. They have their new arena, the UPMC Event Center, a beautiful new arena. If you haven't seen it and checked out the pictures, it looks phenomenal. It's the perfect, I think, arena, especially for RMU and where they're at there. But they're opening it up, and their first game there is going to be against the Pitt Panthers in their season opener. So Pitt giving them a little bit, I guess, throwing them a bone a little bit, helping them out. A friendly neighborhood gesture here in Western PA. But
I don't think it's going to be a blowout by
any
means.
That's what I'm saying. Is what are we expecting out of that season opener against Pitt?
I'm not going to come in and be like a crazy alum and say RMU is going to knock them off, because I don't think that's going to happen. I just think RMU, just as Pitt is really, a lot of new faces there to need to gel. RMU has a lot of new faces, and they don't really have, a go-to senior leader that, everyone can look to. So I think Pitt's going to win the game, but the atmosphere in Moon Township is going to be amazing. It's going to be packed. It's, sellout crowd, new arena, a lot of theatrics, something, a lot of people at RMU never thought would happen in terms of them getting a new arena. And multi-purpose arena, and what it's going to do for that athletic program. So I think it's going to be a great night. I could see Pitt winning almost like a City League game, like by 12, 14.
But a hard-fought game
close
throughout.
In the second half.
Some free throws at the end.
Yeah, Andy Toole, he's played. They've played decent against Power 5, low-tier Power 5 schools. Now with Jeff Capel, I just think that's a different story. It's going to be a great matchup. I think Andy Toole could have beat Kevin Stallings' teams. When
probably.
Kevin Stallings, yeah. So I could see like a 10-point Pitt win around there. Overall, great night.
Yeah, like you said, I think it's going to be a really great atmosphere in there. I think the place is going to be rocking, and I think I think we might get a similar atmosphere to what we saw many years ago when the Colonials welcomed Kentucky and they had that huge upset. Not that it's of the same magnitude, but I think that they're going to have that chip on their shoulder. Like you said, it is the opening of a new arena. The place is going to be a packed house. I think the atmosphere is going to be fantastic to see.
Yeah, I was a freshman at that Kentucky game, and a big thing. Every kid on campus should be at that game. They've had trouble with attendance in the past, but in that Kentucky win, I remember RMU got off to like a 26-12 start. Yeah. And that's when really things started to explode, and the atmosphere started, taking over and actually becoming a thing. So if RMU could get out to an early lead again, I think that would really help.
So as we look at this RMU schedule, we talked about how it's way tougher than what we saw in Duquesne's, especially in the non-conference schedule. Mm-hmm. You got matchups against Notre Dame, like we talked about, Pitt. You got some MAC schools in there some MAC schools. You have Marquette as well. Mm-hmm. You're going to take on Youngstown State, Florida Gulf Coast in there, UNLV. This is a meaty schedule here, and this is going to be they're going to be tested by the time they get to conference play.
Right, and it's just interesting to look at Duquesne's non-conference schedule, which again last season was soft, and then you look at RMU's, and it's really eye-opening. I think the school put this together. Mostly all of these games are on the road. aside from Pitt. But I think just, Andy and the program, they wanted to see how these guys could grow. Like, over the course of the season, I know they're going to be getting money, just from traveling to some of these games. So, and, Florida Gulf Coast game, I believe they played them a few years ago in a postseason game. So it's going to be exciting. Can they grow on the road? Andy Toole teams are known to improve as the season goes on, I think. And can they gel together, and especially some of these new guys? It's going to be a baptism by fire.
And before we wrap things up here on the Robert Morris Colonials, we talk about Andy Toole. And, when he joined Robert Morris 10 years ago, he was the youngest head coach in college basketball. He's still one of the youngest. He's, only 39 years old or so, but he's entering his 10th season. How long do we think Andy Toole is going to remain out in Moon Township? Because you got to assume that some of the biggest programs in the country have their eyes on him, and he's eventually going to get one of the top jobs in the country.
Yeah, I mean, he's been known to be a highly touted coaching, coming up through the ranks. I think early on his stock was a little higher when the Colonials were winning NEC championships, appearing in the conference tournament nearly almost every year, at least the semifinals, making the NCAA tournament. That's when his stock was really high. I think he had a couple chances where he could have gone somewhere. I don't think it's going to be RMU to a Power 5. I could see him. I know he was linked to the Siena job a few years ago. Fordham, I think pretty sure they offered him the job, or that's speculatory. But thank God he didn't take it, because that program's a mess. And I know that was kind of the consensus afterward, is that Andy turned it down. So. I mean, it's not if, it's when Andy leaves. I think he really wanted to see this new arena out and just be the one to kind of lead the hold the lantern as the school went through this major transition. And I think the arena is going to bring him in some new recruits, an improved level of talent, at least in his team. I remember one time I interviewed Mike Rice, and he said, if Andy gets a new arena, the kind of recruiter he is, it's almost going to be unfair, because he was recruiting diamond in the rough prospects to the Sewell Center. So if he could
to play in a high school gym,
exactly. So now that he has this, I think if RMU with some top talent, some increased talent starts getting back to their old ways, he's probably going to make that jump.
Gotcha. So when we look at the Colonials, similar to Duquesne, what's a game in the schedule where we're looking forward to, and what do we think Robert Morris needs to improve on the most heading into the 2019-2020 season?
I think consistency. I know I was at a couple games last season where, even in game, they can play like two different teams. I know, that's something he's going to be preaching on. And so I just say consistency to game, scoring output. How is that going to work? And then some of these individual players, can John Williams, the point guard, kind of increase his scoring? Can he play defense? Can Josh Williams defend? Charles Bain, a guy from the Bahamas who came over, another little surprising recruit. Can he improve in certain aspects of his game defensively, rebounding? These are the kind of things that at least I'm looking to see, and then especially with this freshman class. And then game on the schedule, I mean, obviously Pitt, that's going to be huge. I'm going to be there. I'm sure you will too. And then once the NEC rolls around, how are they going to go against Long Island University? A team that's pegged first in the NEC. That's always a good game. Some of these rivalries. Mount St. Mary's is picked 7th. That's always a great game. Now, Coach Christian is no longer at Mount St. Mary's, so that was kind of the rivalry, Jamin Christian and Andy Toole. So I just say Pitt, and then once again to the NEC, it's kind of these rivalries that are always a lot of fun. Yeah,
I would say the similar ones in the NEC. A game in addition to Pitt, because I think that is going to be a really fun game. I think the game against Marquette coming on November 23rd. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in Milwaukee, but I think that's going to be an interesting game, and I think it's going to be kind of a clash of styles. Marquette is such an offensive juggernaut. But you look at this RMU team, and this is something that I don't think they necessarily need to really improve on much. I mean, there's always room for improvement, but they're one of the best defensive teams in the NEC last year. I believe they were second in scoring defense. Mm-hmm. I also believe they're way up there in the top 2, at least in rebounding as well. So those are things that I think are still going to be strengths for them. Things that they're always going to have. They're going to play with effort. They're going to play with intensity on the defensive end.
Malik Petaway, there was a big.
But that is going to be
So who can kind of step in,
fill that void? Yeah. But I think like you said, consistency, and I think that consistency on the offensive side. They were they were a good 3-point shooting team, but they were pretty streaky on offense overall, scoring the basketball, getting to the line, all that kind of stuff. I think just being more sound on the offensive side and more consistent night in and night out is the key for RMU heading into this season.
There you have
Definitely.
it. Should be fun.
And it should be a fun opening to the season when they take on Pitt in the first game at the UPMC Event Center. I always found it kind of funny that they were playing in the UPMC Event Center.
I know,
and Duquesne's is called the UPMC Center or something else.
It's taking over.
I guess that's how it works. I mean, hey, Pitt's got their hands into everything, I guess.
Right.
But that's going to do it for our Duquesne Robert Morris preview here on the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We thank you for tuning in, and as always, follow us on Twitter at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Follow me, Cale_Berger.
By Chris Mueller.
And check out Pittsburgh Sports Now for the latest on Duquesne, RMU, the Panthers, football and basketball.
Everything.
All of it. It's all there on Pittsburgh Sports Live. But we'll see you next week for another edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live.